group. First message is a roll call, introduction of staff and anyone from the public who wants to admit that they're listening in. So Sarita, could you call off the roll call, please?
Certainly. Chairman James Borston,
I'm still here.
Vice Chair Robert Burnham,
Here.
Nick Kuntz.
Here.
Michael Rassler has emailed me that he will be absent from this meeting. Barbara Silver,
Here.
Suzanne Tejada.
Here.
We are still waiting for Megan Harmon. So I will go on. Brian Demore,
Here.
Rochelle Pegg,
Here.
and Elizabeth Mason.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarita.
And we have a guest, Hillary Blackerby from the MTD.
Welcome, Hillary. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe Alex Ubaldo will be joining us later on during the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 3, committee member reports and staff announcement.
Yes, I have a few, but before I do, does anyone else have any staff reports? I think Barbara did, right?
Well, I'll have a committee report.
Okay, committee reports and staff announcements. So you have a committee report, right?
I'm prepared to, yes.
Okay, would you like to go ahead or should
That
I?
is item number, that is
Chair
item,
Marston, are we talking about the subcommittee reports, which would be item number 7?
No,
Or
this is just
a
a
report
committee-
from a member of the committee?
Yes, report from a member of the committee.
So some of you know that I'm on the downtown parking committee now, motivated in part by my frustration by having our committee communicate with them. And what I've learned from attending meetings online is that they have their mission and their whole setup includes having liaisons. So far, there's a liaison from the Planning Commission, but I think that we should have a liaison from our committee, which I'm no longer officially on. I'm just filling out a vacancy to downtown parking. We've wanted to be proactive in working with the issues at hand, and we've had nothing but frustration with downtown parking, in part because of our quarterly meetings. So I think we should have a regular liaison to that committee. However, those arrangements are made. Brian, maybe you could look into that. But because I don't expect to be on this committee indefinitely. And certainly for us to participate in the way we would like, we need to be in the arena as a visible stakeholder. So that's my suggestion. Otherwise, the issues at hand have to do with State Street and MTD, and that will be covered later in this meeting. So the last downtown parking committee was about a month ago, so my news is not so fresh, but I do think that we need a liaison. So that is my report.
Thank you, Barbara. I think it's a good idea. Brian, do you know anything about the appointments? I'm sure this is out of your, not sure, I think this is out of your bailiwick as far as getting a liaison to that group, but do you have any information on that?
We might be talking about a couple of different things. As far as the liaison, that's something that I could look into. I'm not familiar with a lot of examples of liaisons, from one committee to another, but I can look into that. And then the other piece, I think, is this State Street Advisory Committee, and that's going to come up when we get to item number 10.
Okay, well, I suggest that the members think about who would like to meet with that group. It meets at what, 7:30 a.m. once a month? Is that correct, Barbara?
Yes.
Okay, it would be, I think, a very good idea to have someone from our committee, at least to be able to listen in. It's more than just being a listener. You actually can talk and being involved in the discussion. So thank you, Barbara, for that. Before we get any further, I want to say that Sarita and I will try to adhere to a format that after the presentations, we will first have questions from members, then Sarita will call on those with public comments, and then the members can have a discussion. So we're going to try to keep it into that order. Presentation, questions, public comments, and then discussions.
Jim, this is Bob.
Yeah.
Before we get into public comment, which I'm sure Hillary probably wants to say a few words, I just wanted to mention that, as you know, you and I've been working on several drafts of a letter that I want to write to City Council, Paul Casey, and Rob Dayton regarding the pending status of the downtown waterfront shuttle, the people mover, whatever you want to call it. So I just want to let the committee know that I've been working on a draft letter. It's still in draft form. Nothing's been finalized or ready to be sent yet, but I just want to let the committee know that that is in process.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Does anyone else have any committee member reports? Well, then I will take over. I followed through on our suggestions from our Zoom trial meeting a few weeks ago to make sure that City Clerk Sarah Gorman be made aware of our desire to continue digital access after the lockdown is lifted. This gives people the opportunity to share the democratic process without having to attend it in person. She and I discussed this need and also discussed how to get the recruitment of members back on a more equitable rotation. Right now we have jumbled recruitment, and there's 1 year that has no new members and other years have too many. So she's going to look into that. She's been very short-staffed. Allison Ford just left, and Norma Estrada is out for a while. And Sarah's been working part-time, so she was very, very busy, but very welcoming to have a discussion with me. So she's going to look into that, trying to get the membership more on an equitable rotation. And then we also discussed the problems that have yet to be fixed with GoToWebinar to finally make it accessible. She asked that I let her know what needs to be fixed in the council agenda as now, and then she will make that a boilerplate for all committees. This was promised way back when, but never done. So we would like to have the same exact language that the city council uses with all the other committees. So there's no, so it's the same for everybody. And then I want to point out that she said that this is a pilot testing for Zoom with the AAC. Now the Brown Act says that I can't really ask you to send me comments. So Sarita has offered to accept comments from the staff, from the members of the committee on any problems or suggestions you see with Zoom versus GoToWebinar. So we're the first ones to be using the Zoom, and I'd like you to let Sarita know if you have any comments about which one you prefer or any problems you have with Zoom. But like I said, we're kind of the first people to use it, and they're going to look to us for suggestions on whether the whole city should switch over. Okay, another item here that I'm very happy about. I've been asked by the Braille Institute to give lessons on pedestrian signals to their clientele. I've had many good conversations with city staff engineer or city traffic engineer, Derek Bailey, and Jim Dewey. After Derek set up an email blast site, I think Bob's on that, so that concerned citizens will be informed on changes and new installations. He also shared a map and legend of all the accessible pedestrian signals, which are the ones with the push button and the loudspeaker announcing the street, a vibrating arrow, and all sorts of good items, even a locator tone at each button. So he sent me all that information. And also a good fact is that the city has now decided that they would spend money to install 2 new accessible pedestrian signals each year. And in addition to that, any new improved traffic control devices at major intersections, such as the Alamar and State, or at De La Guerra and Santa Barbara Street. There's a new one out there at Meg's and Cliff. So the city is slowly getting more of those in place. And Derek and Jim have also been helpful, as a big problem for the visually impaired and blind is that they don't know when signals have been updated. So this will help get hopefully a website someplace with that. And Jim Dewey's also going to give me information on the different types of traffic control devices. Some are completely timed, like downtown State Street. There is no push buttons. It's just a timed setup. But when you had low traffic, it kind of got scary for blind people because you didn't know if there was no traffic because there was a red light or whether there was just no traffic. So, and other areas have certain types of push buttons. So it'd be nice to get this kind of all categorized for the blind users.
Jim, I have a
Yes.
quick question. This is Barbara.
Yes.
Can that information be accessed through the city's accessibility page? They have a page that has, I think that Sarita worked on. I can't remember. Is that what it's called, Sarita?
It's the accessibility link on the top of the page. Is that what you're thinking, Barbara?
I'm thinking about the page that may be I wasn't prepared to say anything, so I hadn't looked at it, but it has all of the accessible issues that have to do with the city. It isn't on our page, it's on this other page. That's where I think this
It's on the top.
belongs.
I agree.
And because that's maintained by somebody else in the city, it's not expected to be maintained by us. Is that
Correct.
right? Or Sarita, do you have to maintain it?
I maintain it.
Okay, so it's not exactly maintained somewhere else in the city. Is that because it's out of your responsibility, Brian, as the ADA coordinator? Or it's not really clear who's responsible for that page?
I
Well,
think we've
it's
discovered
because,
that Sarita's able and willing is why that happened, I think, right?
yeah, that's a piece of it. And the information is collected from various divisions and even at times different departments. So yes, it's a couple of different factors, but that could be a location once we had enough information that Derek was comfortable to release. We could
Okay.
put it there.
Because I'd like to see a central place that has the traffic, that has the parking, that has various issues that we've been working on, like the blue curb places. There is a map someplace, but there's nothing that ties it all together. But then again, Brian, you're talking about just the kind of financial support you have for managing all these bits and pieces. So it seems to me that needs to be clarified, that there needs to be a clear responsibility and some kind of clear support for it. Thank you.
For clarification, Barbara, we have been working towards, we as a committee and with staff, with Sarita's help, we have been working towards making that that page you reference at the top right, the kind of starting point for all things related to accessibility on the website. Not all of the information may be on that page, but it's you could drill down from that page to get to everything related to accessibility is the intent that I've been trying to work towards.
Oh, good, Nick. So that document that was delivered about spelling out who can park in what places, including blue places on private lots, is that document accessible from that page?
Yes.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, Barbara. All I have right now is the map showing the 20 or so accessible pedestrian signals with a legend. But of course, the blind people can't read this map. So I'm trying to get something written up in the future with all the other push buttons in town. and all the different types of traffic control signals. So that would take some work from Jim Dewey and Derek before we get that. And you're right, we could put it on that website if Truda can find the time, or we can ask Derek to have a web page that has all that information with a link on our site to that. And that would save Sarita from having to do that work if Derek and his people are willing to set up a website that shows all the traffic information. So I'm still working on that, but right now all we have is the map with the 20 or so accessible pedestrian signals. And that's all I have to say. Any other comments? Okay, the next is public comment. Any member of the public may address the Access Advisory Committee for up to 5 minutes on any subject with the jurisdiction of Access Advisory Committee that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the committee. So do we have a public comment? And I know we do.
Mr. Chairman, we do have one person, Nancy Capone. I believe she would like to make a public comment. Let me just switch to that slide. Bear with me here. Got so many things.
I'm not sure with the Zoom. It's different. It's a little different now.
Okay. And participants.
Oh,
And,
I muted her.
and Ms. Capone, if you'd like to speak now.
Thank you very much, Ms. King. Yes, first of all, I want to thank all of the committee members and staff members again for all of your continuing good work on accessibility issues. Today, I just want to mention an ongoing problem in my downtown neighborhood. We've had the public sidewalk has been blocked for many months on West Figueroa Street at the corner of Bath Street. And I have been calling the city since April 19th, calling them regularly, and still the debris has not been cleared. And, you know, it's a shame because the city built a beautiful accessible corner crossing there for people differently abled. And then all the debris is blocking the public sidewalk and passageway for many months. So I'm bringing it to you folks. Hopefully we can get some results and clearing the public sidewalk. And that's all I have today. Thank you again for all your advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Capone.
This is Jim. What kind of, is this a construction debris or what kind of blockage is it?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I'm an art historian, so I could call it installation art, but it's not in the appropriate location. It's just a bunch of debris, skeleton sculptures, free libraries, junk, furniture, plants. Is completely blocking the public sidewalk and has been for, you know, over 6 months. And just because we live downtown doesn't mean that we shouldn't still have accessible sidewalks. And I've been trying through phoning the city repeatedly, and they sent an inspector out and gave a warning, but still no clearing has occurred. It's just getting worse. So anyway, I appreciate anyone's help with getting our sidewalk cleared again. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had good luck with Brian clearing other construction debris. So hopefully, Brian, can you look into that and see why it's blocking the sidewalk?
Yes, normally what we do is send a public works inspector out there. It sounds like that has happened. So I'm not sure what's holding up clearing the space, but we'll take another look out there and see if we need to elevate to get some action.
Nancy?
I believe I know that location. As you described it, I know where you're talking about.
Thank you. You can't miss it if you drive by. It's pretty bad. So
Well, when you said skeletons, that kind of gave it away.
that.
Do
Thank
we-
you, sir.
Do we know what group has put this stuff there?
I think it's a tenants situation.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
I'm not personally familiar with this situation. Haven't seen it, but I will endeavor to go look at it myself. I'd like to ask staff to look into what enforcement efforts have already happened and report back to the committee as soon as possible so that we are sure to keep this on our radar.
That's a good idea, Nick.
Thank you.
Brian, can you let us know through an email what you find when you do look into this?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is Bob. Nancy, what's the exact location on Figueroa? Which side of Figueroa? Is it before, is it on the east
It's-
side or the west side of Bath?
I'm not very good with the east and west. I apologize. It's on the side of the street closest to CVS on Curio. It's across from the Rainbow Bridge home for wayward teens. The detox center is not too far. We've got it all downtown, but yeah, you can't miss it. Like Brian said, if you drive by, you just can't miss it. It's blocking the entire sidewalk and has been for over 6 months. So
Wow, okay.
just take a look. Thank you all. That's all. I don't want to take any more of your time, but we appreciate if we can get this resolved. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we have another public comment.
Yes, we do. We have Hillary Blackery from MTD. Hillary?
Thank you, Ms. King, and thank you, Chair and members. It's great to be with you today. I want to thank you for all of your work that you do across our city. It really makes a huge difference for everyone, and exciting to be on the inaugural Zoom test as a fellow advisory committee member. I look forward to hopefully this being a little better than the other platforms, so we'll see how it goes. So I'm Hillary Blackerby. I'm the planning and marketing manager for the Santa Barbara MTD. And we are currently in our annual process of our proposed service changes. These would go into effect August 16th, 2021. We do this every year. We have several different proposals, obviously throughout the pandemic. Our service has changed, or really it changed a little over a year ago when the original lockdown happened. Across our service, there were several lines that we suspended for a few different reasons. But the one that I think is probably of most interest to you all, and all of these can be read about at our website, sbmtd.gov/service changes. Everyone's welcome to check it out. But one of them that I think is of most interest, and I've heard from a few of the members, is the downtown and waterfront shuttle. The status of that is that we were obviously at the beginning of the pandemic last year. We put several lines on pause, and we were informed by the city of Santa Barbara, specifically downtown parking and public works, where the additional funding for the service comes from. It's a little over $1 million a year. That's the fare buy down to help subsidize the operations of the service. We were informed that due to downtown parking budget taking a hit, they would not be able to provide that subsidy this fiscal year, and that they desired to terminate the service and the contract that they have with us. We wrote back and shared that, let's see how the year goes. We're going to keep it suspended for now. We understand that the financial aspect, is, on hold because of not collecting as much parking revenue, but that we would look to the future to see what was possible. And of course, last May, none of us knew what the year would look like. So now obviously we've gone through a year, and we're seeing that the money is not, the city is not coming up with the money essentially to continue that service, and that is funding that we would need to operate it. And as we look internally, we're not seeing a windfall of sustainable funds to fund the downtown and waterfront shuttles. And we are making sure that we have a bit of a driver shortage at this point. We're making sure that the service that we put out, that we can make it every day. And so because of that, because of these circumstances, our proposed service changes include termination of downtown and waterfront shuttle. We don't like to do this. This is not a comfortable thing. I can tell you as the person who's reading all the survey results and getting information from the public, it's really hard to read and hard to take in because it's such a beloved service. So what I would recommend to all of you and to the public, and I know some of you have already, is to fill out the survey that's at that website I mentioned. It basically explains the proposed changes and then gives you the opportunity to give feedback. We will compile all of that feedback to our board of directors, who at the May 18th meeting will make a decision moving forward on all the different service change proposals. We've received a lot of feedback, but we want to get even more. May 11th at noon, we have a Zoom meeting where the community can come, listen to details about it, and then give feedback on those. No matter how you give feedback, if it's on the survey, if it's on the meeting, if you want to send me an email, call, I can get that information out. We'll take it any way we can get it, and just want to come share that information with you. But we look forward to being a part of the conversation about how people get around downtown. I think with the State Street Committee that is planned and taking applications now, we definitely want to be a part of the conversation because we know that not everyone can get around downtown walking or biking or driving. So sort of, nor should they, right? So look forward to working with you and working with the rest of the community on this. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Hillary. This is Jim. I have one question. I know we discussed by email. Many people had asked to change it from termination to suspension, and you said you couldn't change it midstream. Is there a possibility that after your board meeting, it could be called a suspension instead of a termination? Or at what time could you change that wording?
Good question. Yes. So when the board makes their decision at the May 18th meeting, they may decide to keep it as a suspension and not a termination. That would be up to them. And I guess functionally, what that would mean is sort of either way, the shuttle is not coming back, you know, in August, for example.
Right.
But the contract ends at the end of June 2022. If no action is taken to terminate it in the meantime. So if it were suspended, it would just continue to not run, but technically be technically still exist in concept, I guess.
Thank you. As you know, the AIA had a charrette where they showed their designs for downtown, and almost all of them had a shuttle system. So I just hate to have it totally terminated and it might not come back that way. So thank you for that information.
Thank you, Chair.
This is Nick Kuntz. Just a couple of quick comments. I may be off here, but I thought I remembered that this city subsidy was a requirement of some other project. So I need to look into that. And also, but my biggest concern with the loss of service here is that is the only connection between our city's rail service and the main bus terminal. And I think that the city has an ADA obligation there to keep our public transportation system connected and working. That's all I have.
Well, this is Barbara. I have a question. Apparently, the shuttle was financed off of parking fees. Well, just because parking fees disappear, it seems to me the shuttle shouldn't disappear. So I'd like to have more information about how the shuttle is budgeted, how it was it just seems to me that something strange has happened here and we don't have enough of the moving pieces because the shuttle is used not just by people downtown who are not able to park their cars, but by tourists, by visitors. by people from the county, not just the city. So something seems really strange about the budgeting. Do you have more information, Hillary, on how this is budgeted and how lack of cars in the parking lot would be pull the plug on this service?
Good question. Well, that would be a question for downtown parking staff, Mr. Garza or Mr. Dayton. I do not know all the intricacies of their budget. And I think you mentioned you're on downtown parking, so you have a direct line. I'm not sure why it actually hasn't been on the agenda lately, since that's generally where the reports are delivered, but they'd have to speak more to their budget.
Well, excuse me, so if downtown parking is the sole source of funding for the Waterfront shuttle, that seems not really functional, that there's something strange.
Barbara, this is Jim. Waterfront does kick in part of the money. It's mostly from downtown parking, but I think it's like 30% or so from Waterfront. So there's two different funding sources from the city.
Well, the current budgeting seems not at all resilient given what we're dealing with. And whoever is, maybe it's Megan that we need to be asking about city council's decision to cancel the service based on lack of activity in the parking lots. Is Megan here this morning yet? Has she joined us?
She is not logged on yet.
Okay, well, so I have some questions about the functioning of the financial backing for the service.
Barbara, may I suggest that you write to Megan when we're done? And also, she's just got appointed to the Coastal Commission, and maybe they have some input on that. Because it seems like many years ago, this was required for the Paseo Nuevo and for Coastal Commission for parking mitigation. So maybe you could talk to Megan and also bring it up at the next Downtown Parking Committee. Would you do that for us? I just lost my audio.
No, I hear you.
Oh, well,
I
okay.
think we somehow lost Barbara, or she didn't hear
Okay.
your question. I haven't heard a response.
Oh, sorry, I had my microphone on mute. So I
Okay.
was asking if I should, for Brian's input on whether I should be writing to Megan, or this is a question that would go through him.
Well, I guess, first of all, we can't get into too much of a discussion on this item because it just came up through public comment. But I would say that if members of the committee have, if they're interested in this item, you know, as Ms. Blackerby pointed out, please go through that process with MTD to submit comments, and MTD is going to go through their process. And depending on what comes out of that, I'm sure there will be conversations between MTD and the city of Santa Barbara. Likewise, members of the committee is certainly welcome to contact city staff or council. We're in this budget process, so that's another opportunity to say something. But I'm anticipating there will be conversations, and certainly, you know, as we look beyond June of 2022, I'm anticipating there's going to be a strong expectation of transit being provided in some form. So there's a lot to come on this. Please provide your comment to MTD and participate in the process.
Okay, thank you, because that's where I can ask my question then about the original agreement that formed the basis of the funding. Thank you.
So just quick recap here. The purpose of this committee is to advise staff. And I would like to take this opportunity to advise staff to look into the city's obligation to keep our city's public transportation system accessible, and specifically how the city plans to move forward during this process to keep our public rail system connected to our public bus system. This is where I expect the ADA coordinator to acknowledge the recommendation by the committee.
Committee member Coates, yes, I've heard that recommendation. We have been looking into a couple of things. One is the funding, if there's any prior obligations for the funding. And then this other piece, as far as connectivity, that's something that we can look into and report back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick and Brian. I appreciate that. Okay, item number 5 is approval of the minutes. So does anyone have any comments on the minutes? Any proposed changes? So I'll welcome a motion to accept the minutes. Does that mean no one wants to approve?
Suzanne, if you were talking, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I was muted. This is Suzanne Tejada. I make a motion to approve the minutes from the February 12th, 2021 meeting.
Brief
Thank you.
discussion. Bob Burnham had not had an opportunity to review them, if I'm not mistaken. And I think maybe it would be prudent to postpone approving the minutes.
Well, this is Jim. I just have a comment for Bob. I think he read the draft minutes, which Sarita said haven't changed since the later ones. So Bob, did you read the draft minutes, or would you rather postpone?
Bob, perhaps you're muted. We're not hearing you.
Bob is trying to unmute. We've had this technical glitch earlier, so he's trying to unmute right now.
What is the keystroke for mute and unmute for Zoom?
*6 to unmute.
That's on the phone though, right?
That is on the phone and it is on his iPad too.
And while we're waiting, Sarita, what's the shortcut for people who are on a PC who want to mute and unmute?
Can you hear me now?
There is Bob.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I finally found the unmute button. Jim, for sake of time and housekeeping, I was going to say, let's go ahead and move and second the motion to approve the minutes. I think I did read the draft, and if nothing else, I could just abstain. But I think I did read them, and I don't remember finding any problems. So I'll go ahead and second the motion for now.
All right. So it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Sarita, could you do a roll call?
Mr. Marston,
I approve.
Mr. Burnham,
Aye.
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Ms. Silver,
Aye.
Ms. Tejada.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 6 is the ADA coordinator's report. This is from Brian to fill us in on some things with his information. Brian, take it away.
Okay, thank you. And Sarita, do you have another slide? If you can advance one more slide, at least one more, I think.
Please bear with me.
Okay. Sarita, I'm going to go ahead and get started because I have in front of me my notes, and I'll let you try to catch up. So I had a number of items under this ADA coordinator report, just a bunch of brief things I wanted to update you all on. The first one is just a heads up that the clerk's office, we've been informed, has been working on setting up a training for Brown Act. It's kind of a Brown Act refresher, and that's going to be available to staff and board and committee members. I haven't seen an invite yet on that. We do believe it is being scheduled for later this month. I definitely will attend and would encourage you all to attend when that comes out. I know the clerk's office is now quite short-handed, so hopefully that's still in the works for this month. I think you've all heard, over the years, bits and pieces about the Brown Act, and I think we've previously brought in one of the city attorneys to talk about it, so I'm not going to get into a discussion today about that, but just look for that email. We'll probably send it out via email as soon as it comes out. And then on the ADA coordinator outreach, this is something that as I'm trying to do the best that I can in this role. One of the things that I've done recently this month was reaching out to other ADA coordinators. I'm not alone in this. There are other people out there, and it's been really helpful chatting with some folks who do this. Some of them do this full time, and that's interesting to gain their perspective as somebody who that is their job 100% of their time. And yeah, so they're all part of a process where I'm hoping to get ideas of what is working well in other communities and come up with some strategies so that I can be a more helpful ADA coordinator, both for this committee and for our whole community. So I just wanted to let you know about that. And the next one here, CASP. I mentioned in the last meeting that I was interested in bringing a CASP on board as quickly as possible. And I have made a lot of progress on that. I've reached out to a bunch of different certified access specialists and don't have a contract in place yet. Part of the reason is, as I've done this ADA coordinator outreach, it's just become very clear to me that there's a lot more to all of this than just what a CASP provides. The CASP kind of lives in the building world, but accessibility, there's program access, and then really, I think when so many things went to digital, it became even more clear how significant digital accessibility is in all of this. So trying to, with the limited resources we have, figure out where is our greatest need, and a CASP would be helpful, but some of these other areas are also needs. So that's just the quick update on CASP. And then this other item, it says how to stay informed. I think I've mentioned this in the past, but a lot of items come up at the council level, and the timing might not be great for this committee to weigh in on it. And sometimes I myself am not even aware of the items until the week before the council meeting. But what I would say is for members of this committee who are interested in what's happening across the board, there's a really easy way online to go and sign up to get notifications for any other boards and committees, but also for the city council as soon as they post an agenda. Of course, that's only a 72-hour notice most of the time, but at least it gives you a chance to see what's coming up in a future public meeting. And with that, there's opportunity to participate via public comment. Other ways to get involved or to be aware of what's happening is with our large capital projects. They typically have a website and an opportunity to sign up for a monthly update. So that's all available via the website. And those are just other ways, if the committee has the time, is interested in getting more involved, I would encourage you to go to that website and sign up for the notifications. Okay, next bullet point is regarding the budget, and we're well into that process for the next cycle, which is FY22 and 23. The proposed budget is now available on the city's website. If you look under budget and finance, there is a special council meeting on May 26th at 9 a.m. to noon that is going to include the general fund and Measure C capital. And I can tell you that the ADA transition plan implementation and the ADA walkways and pathways each have been restored to the previous level of funding, $250,000 for ADA transition plan implementation and $100,000 for ADA walkways and pathways. I think there was a slight reduction made last year. So that's what's proposed. There's the meeting on May 26th, and then the kind of the final council meeting regarding the budget is scheduled for June 9th. It's an evening meeting from 6 to 9. And that is often when certain community requests for funding are discussed. So those are two opportunities to provide some comment, participate in the budgeting. Oops. The next item here, it says DOJ, that's the Department of Justice, a settlement agreement for the train station. This went to council on Tuesday, so Tuesday of this week. And what happened was the Department of Justice did a nationwide investigation into ADA compliance at Amtrak stations. I think there's 514 stations nationwide, and Amtrak is responsible for 400 of them. The remaining, I guess, 114 stations are owned by other entities. So the Santa Barbara Amtrak station, City of Santa Barbara is the owner of the station. Amtrak basically is only responsible for the platform. So when DOJ came out and did their investigation just recently, and they notified us in March of this year that it completed the investigation and that the station is not readily accessible to and usable by individuals with disabilities. So they developed this settlement agreement, which is asking us to take certain steps to make that facility in compliance. We have agreed to the terms of that settlement agreement, which are going to require us to hire an independent licensed architect. I'm going to recommend that the architect either also be or have on board a CASP, even though this is all driven by federal the CASP doesn't necessarily mean anything to the Department of Justice. Just, we're in California. I think it's important to have a CASP also participate in that. So first step is that survey, and then next will be a remedial action plan. So more of the plans and specs that you would get from an architect, and then finally implementation. And there's timelines associated with that we need to follow to be in compliance with the settlement agreement. So this was part of a nationwide thing, and we weren't terribly involved in any of this process. They let us know back in 2018 that they were looking into this, and then we basically didn't hear anything until earlier this year. But we've agreed to the terms of that settlement agreement, and I can continue to keep this committee informed of that process that we have to go through. Okay, I have listed here MTD proposed service changes. I don't think I need to cover that because we heard from Ms. Blackerby, so I'll skip over that. And the next item is accessible parking enforcement. This is something that I know the committee's interested in getting regular updates on, and I was able to get some updated information from our police department. I think it was earlier this week or last week. And I can tell you that in 2020, they had a 5-year high, actually, of number of citations for accessible parking. There were 393 citations. And this year, they're a little bit behind that pace, but still above kind of the 5-year running average. And another thing that we hear about, or I've heard several times, I think, from this committee is, what can we do if somebody blocks an off-street, or I guess on-street as well, but an ADA, an accessible parking space is being blocked by something other than a vehicle? What can we do about that? And I checked in with our attorney's office on that. And it's interesting that the California vehicle code is designed, to enforce against the license plate. So that's not the mechanism to go after that type of a violation. I was told that what we would have, it would have to be a municipal code violation. But in order to do that, we would need to add a provision to the existing municipal code, which didn't sound like something that's going to happen overnight. But it was suggested, and I do agree that normally if this is happening, it's going to be related to an active construction project, in which case it would make most sense to get a building, if it's on a parcel, to get a building inspector out there and basically have them tell the contractor they've got to move that stuff that's blocking. And if it's offsite, Public Works, if it's in the right of way, it's Public Works, we'd have a Public Works permit. I don't know that that we've seen that as much of the issue. So there's some information there anyway on how to handle this. And if you see these things, let me know. I can reach out to the building official. We can get somebody out there to take a look, talk to a contractor, and get things moved. I don't know that this is happening frequently, but hopefully, I know Chair Marston has mentioned this to me, so I don't know if there's any questions or follow-up on that. I would just say, let me know if you're still continuing to see this issue.
I see it fairly regularly, and I would be interested in pursuing a municipal code provision as a long-term solution. Do you have any suggestions on how we might begin that process?
Yeah, I would just thank you, Member Coons. I would reach out to our attorney's office and see what that would look like. It should be a fairly straightforward as far as what language would need to get drafted, change. So I'll check in with him on that. And
Did
I
you
can
have a
report
specific
back.
contact? Is that Mr. Doimus or?
I normally work with Dan Henschke, but something like this might fall under John Doimus or another attorney.
Thank you.
Brian, this is Chair Marston again. I appreciate you finally getting information from the police department. And I was glad to hear that you said that we could contact you and you would contact the building department, because right now, some of us have filed inspection requests, but it takes quite a while for a building department to get around to that. And these things are very transient, or sometimes are, and need instant attention. So this is great news if you say, yeah, if you get a complaint about someone parking on a non-public place, that you can go right to the building department and have them spend a inspector. Is that correct? You can do that for us?
Yes, that's what I would recommend we do.
That's great.
And hopefully we'll have some compliance on that, because, you know, without a municipal code language, I don't know how much teeth we have, but it would be extremely disappointing if a contractor, given the situation and having it explained to them by a building official, would ignore it. But it may happen, unfortunately. So that's why I think what Nick suggested would be good to have that backstop for the
Yeah, absolutely.
situations where there's non-compliance.
I'm certain that even if a building official came out and said, you can't do this, that the contractor would agree to keep the peace, and then knowing that there would be no ramifications to inaction, would just blow it off. See it happen all the time. I appreciate you following up on this, and the municipal code is sounding very promising as a solution. Unless there are teeth, nothing's going to change. Similarly, along these lines, I think the biggest offender, you know, in a construction situation, if they're doing that, the whole parking lot's probably closed. You know, likely the business is shut down for construction. That's not a big concern to me. What is a concern to me, and what I still deal with and frustrated by on a regular basis, is the valet parking providers who will monopolize ADA parking, and they will train their staff to respond that, oh, it's a private lot, the ADA doesn't apply, and that's factually inaccurate. And so I guess that we need this to be part of our municipal code provision as well.
Thanks, Nick. This is Jim. I just want to say, I'm not sure if Brian was involved with the ADA at this time, but 3 or 4 years back, I got a complaint that there was a whole bunch of construction material blocking the entrance to Mackenzie Park off of Las Positas. I called then Public Works Director Rebecca Bjork, and it was moved the next day. So she was able to, even though that was, well, it was on the right of way, but she did get that done right away just by calling her. So there might be other ways to do this also. But I think that was a city contractor. But
right, that makes it a little easier, right, or a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I guess one other quick thing on this, and I don't know that this type of violation is something that would work best using an online form, but one thing, you know, as I talked to, it was actually Pasadena's ADA coordinator, they have an online form where if people see accessibility concerns, they can just immediately go online and fill that out, and she receives it as soon as it's submitted. And that seems to be effective for a lot of different types of things. I don't know that it would be the best tool for this, because sometimes it's got to happen at the right moment, like kind of urgently, especially if it's the valet thing where they can quickly move. But I'll look into what we can do with the municipal code to be helpful on this. And then last on my ADA coordinator report, it just says AAC resolution. I know this is going to come up in the subcommittee report, so I'm not going to go at length here, but staff has been working with the subcommittee to resolve any remaining issues. And it really, at this point, comes down to two things, which is the terms. We've already heard a little bit about that and how they've become unstaggered, and that's not really helpful for managing a committee. And then I think there was a proposal to extend the term from 3 years to 4 years, which matches more of the other boards and committees citywide. And I think staff and the subcommittee are fine with that. It's just more the how to get these terms back to being better staggered. And I was happy to hear that City Clerk Sarah Gorman is open to what it might take to get there. So other than that, the remaining outstanding item has to do with frequency of meetings. And I think when we get to the subcommittee reports, we can have more of the discussion about that. But to me, it's kind of balancing how many regular meetings do we have with how much activity is happening with the subcommittees. And I think if we're having substantial subcommittee meetings and making good progress with the subcommittee meetings, then maybe there's a more of an acceptance to sticking with the quarterly meetings. But I would be probably the first to admit that, in the last year or so, we haven't been making a lot of progress with those subcommittees. So I can understand the desire of the resolution subcommittee to increase the frequency of regular meetings. So that's still kind of on the table and being discussed. And we'll hear more about that from the subcommittee. So I think that's all I had for
Brian,
today under ADA coordinator.
I have a quick follow-up on the accessible parking enforcement. When I first got involved as a member of the public with the Access Advisory Committee, I would believe it was February meeting 2017. I could be off on that. I presented a request that staff look into a citizen enforcement app that was available through the various app stores. I recommended one in particular. I can send that recommendation back again as a follow-up. And it's run by a third-party contractor. So the way it works is, you download the app on your phone, you see somebody violating ADA law, you take a couple of, ADA parking law. You take a couple pictures of the signage, the cars, the license plate, and you submit it. And just like the subcontracted red light cameras, it's processed elsewhere, out of state, and it's just an income stream for the city of Santa Barbara. And I would like us to revisit that proposal. The biggest problem with ADA parking violations in my experience is with the entitled motorists who think, oh, I'm just going to be there 5 minutes. Nobody will ever know. I know the parking enforcement schedules. I know what I can get away with and the calculated risks I take, and I see the public do it all the time with the ADA parking. And I think if this would be a big deterrent, and if the city could see it as a income stream, I think it would benefit the disabled public.
I
Thank you,
have
Nick.
a quick comment, and that is things have changed a lot digitally since you first suggested that, Nick, and now with the parking lots going into this other kind of digital world, I think your suggestion might be more positively received this time around.
I hope so. I don't know who the suggestion needs to get to for evaluation and consideration.
Nick, this is Chair Marston. I remember when you did propose that, and I know how it was turned down, but I think it's a very good idea. Like you said, it's an income stream. And I think it's a very good way to help the police, because as you know, we all know the schedule of how often they go down the street. So this would really help. So maybe you could send it first to Brian and have him take a look and see if Brian can get anyone to say, yeah, this is a good idea. And,
Yeah, please send that to me. I'm interested in learning about that, first of all, and then hopefully finding out where it's been successful, probably talking to some other agencies. But I think more than the revenue stream, I'm interested in it if it actually becomes effective in deterring people from parking in those spaces who do not belong there.
Great. This is Chair Marston again. I want to thank you, Brian, for this comprehensive report. And I want to bring up something that maybe could be later, but I want to bring it up here. I think you've been the best director of the AAC. I've been around since 1994 or 5 with this group. So I thank you for all that. But here's my point. Brian is the city's chief engineer. He's tasked with being an ADA coordinator, but he can't spend all his time doing that kind of work. Some cities have a full-time ADA person at the higher level. And nothing against Brian, but he doesn't have the power to tell people to fix things. He can only say there's a problem here, but he can't make the police do something, or he can't make Parks and Recs do something. So I would like to suggest that maybe, is there a way that we can, maybe in the budget meeting with the city or later, write to Paul Casey and say, look, we need to have someone at the very top who has, I won't call him policing power, but I will. But I think it would help Brian a lot if there was someone who actually had the power to say, you must fix this in this week. And also it would help with Brian's concern about having extra meetings. I know one of the problems is he doesn't have the staff and the time and the financing to do that. But as Brian said to me a few weeks ago, the AAC is a citywide committee as far as what it affects. And it shouldn't be funded only by the engineering department. Did I say that correctly, Brian?
Whoops, I was muting myself. Well, I think to be effective, we need contribution and buy-in across all city departments. And what I would say, and I appreciate your comments, Chair Marston, the more I look into what the ADA coordinator is, I just get exposed to how big of a role it is, and it's daunting at times. What I'm trying to do in talking to these ADA coordinators is come up with something that can work within the existing constraints that we have here. And one thing, we heard earlier in this meeting talk about liaisons. What may be helpful, and it's early, I haven't put any kind of concept together yet, but what may be helpful is if there's a liaison within each of the departments, an ADA liaison. So I have a point of contact in those departments when something comes up. The community knows to go to me because I'm the ADA coordinator, but I can turn to somebody in another department and I know that they're going to take the matter seriously and get back to me or respond directly to the citizens. So that's an idea that's on the table. There's a lot of ideas out there right now, and I don't think that it's going to be helpful necessarily for people to start suggesting. I mean, talk to me is great, but reaching out to council members or the city administrator's office, that's too soon, if at all.
Okay.
But let's work together with the constraints that we have and try to make this as effective as we can. And if those constraints are limiting it, are too limiting, then we need to propose something different.
Okay, because it is true that every department has to have an AAC person, right? But they're mostly work with employee problems, accommodations and stuff. They're not looking at parking or construction problems or access. It's mostly for employees. But anyway, Brian, I'm ready to talk to higher ups. I just thought that maybe if there was someone at the administrator's office who had the power to say, you must get this done now, that would help you. But I'm there to help if you need it. Okay, thank you.
This is Nick Kuntz. I just want to echo Chair Marston's sentiment that I agree that Brian, you have been the best interface for our board so far, and I very much appreciate you and what you do, and I hope that despite the frequent frustrations that I'm venting with the system, you realize that I'm not pointing that frustration at you. You just happen to be the point of contact that friction occurs at.
Very
This
well
is Bob.
said.
This is Bob. I concur with Jim and Nick on that point. Brian, thank you for all that you've been able to do.
Okay, the next item is number 7, subcommittee reports.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me,
Yes.
public comment? Anyone like to speak for public comment? Please raise your hand. I do not see any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarita, for remembering that. Number 7, subcommittee reports. The first one listed is a sidewalk ad hoc committee. That's Mr. Berna, Mr. Kuntz, and myself. We did not have a meeting in the last 3 months, so there's no report there. The next one is the Blue Curb Parking Ad Hoc Committee. Nick Kuntz and Suzanne Tejada. Do we have a report from them?
Same report as last time. There's, this subcommittee is stalled pending response from downtown parking.
Yes, we are. Thank you, and that's coming up on the agenda later.
And
Jim,
just
Bob. Oh,
just as a reminder, we've been in this status since November of 2019.
Bob?
Jim, this is Bob. Yeah, I had a comment on the sidewalk ad hoc committee. We haven't met since January 28th, whenever the meeting was, but I am in touch with Derek Bailey regarding pending traffic signals and where I suggest they might be installed over the next year or two. So that's my only update.
Okay, thanks. I didn't cover that in my report when I talked to Derek, but he did say that they have funding for 2 more APS, and he did ask for locations that were important. And I was going to have Bob talk to him about that, and also I could get the Braille Institute people to talk on that. But that's nice. If they have funding for 2 a year, we get some input on that. So thanks for bringing that up, Bob.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is the annual report and Access Advisory Committee Resolution Ad Hoc Committee. That's Barbara Silver, Nick Kuntz, and Bob Burnham.
I have just a quick comment before. I wanted to mention a very nice correspondence between Barbara and Brian. I read that, and very thoughtful comments and suggestions regarding trying to solve this staggered term challenge, and also the discussion of possibly extending having more meetings per year. And I figured that 12 was over the top, but if we can reach some kind of compromise, between going beyond quarterly meetings to have, additional meetings, regular meetings to cover items on agendas and follow up on pending items, that seems to be a chronic problem with this committee. So Barbara, if you want to comment more.
Well, I'm satisfied with the report as Brian gave it to us, since we're still chewing on how to get our committees balanced. Basically, with more meetings, and my other suggestion, I just think that everything we can do to be visible in the community helps. And the lack of response that has come from other departments is, again, because we're not very visible. We don't meet very often. And the Brown Act seems to constrain us. Now, I'm not so constrained by the Brown Act as other people are, but I respect their right to be law-abiding citizens, even if I have a slightly different take on what's covered by the Brown Act. So Brian, I do appreciate you saying there'll be a training that anybody who wants to read about the Brown Act can go online and learn everything that the training could possibly include. One of the things that I learned is nobody's ever been prosecuted under the Brown Act. So I hate for us to not communicate with each other because of the constraints of the Brown Act. So that's my parting shot as I'm anticipating leaving this committee if new people are applying. I guess that's my 2 cents worth.
Okay, thank you. The next one is the website application replacement project ad hoc committee.
I'm sorry, just a
Go
quick
ahead.
comment on the subcommittee efficacy. I can't help but underscore the fact that the subcommittee lack of progress is largely due to the bigger staff, not AAC staff, the bigger city staff's lack of response to our advice and inquiry.
That's so true, Nick, and I'm just going to get to that in my second comment here.
So any increased frequency of AAC meetings would likely not be as effective as we might hope, because we're just going to be more frequently disappointed by a lack of response.
Very true. So the website application replacement project is to try to get a more accessible website. And that's Bob Burnham, Nick Kuntz, and myself. We had a very, very productive meeting with the large group tasked with selecting a vendor for making the website accessible. We spent quite a few hours, the three of us, testing 20 or more sites from 4 proposed vendors. And we went through all their sites and took notes. Then we attended each vendor's presentation of their accessibility features. We all then gave our input on what we found. One group was selected based on this input, but we were asked not to reveal the winner until final contracts negotiation are made. It was very gratifying to be included and treated with respect for this important decision. Would the other members care to add comments to what I probably missed? Bob or Nick, do you have any comments about that whole procedure and how we were treated?
Well, I mentioned to Scott Nelson and Zach Smith, who were sort of they were our facilitators for these meetings. I think one of the proposers resigned, so we're left with 3. But the overall tenure of the meetings was that, in my experience, and I've been on this committee for over 10 years, that and I think I told Scott this 5 years ago, or maybe even less, we probably wouldn't even have been included in weighing in on the process as a legitimate stakeholder, even though we were told our input is only 10% of the overall weigh-in of the steering committee, which doesn't seem like a whole lot, but at least we were given participation in the process. And to me, that's a huge step from the way things were run a few years ago. So I was very encouraged by having these meetings and being able to weigh in and really show them points of accessibility and points of inaccessibility on these websites. So it was very enlightening to be a part of the process.
This is Nick Kuntz. I have a couple of comments along this line as well. I agree that overall it was a very positive experience. I think that the being told that we only had a 10% influence was probably the biggest negative in my mind. Shows how little accessibility means to the city of Santa Barbara. But it was interesting to have that quantified. But I gave a lot of thought to that experience and wished that, we were similarly included in other decision-making processes. But it occurs to me that this is not any sort of contentious decision. And everybody recognizes and accepts and acknowledges the ADA requirements here. It's a given. And we, after evaluating all of the finalists, we as the ADA specialists, I say that in air quotes, came away feeling that they were all pretty equal in most regards. And so there wasn't a lot of risk for city staff to include us because they all provided pretty much the same level of functionality. And so it was all kind of for naught. And any one of the finalists would have appears to have been able to provide an accessible solution. There may be some that were slightly preferable to one or more of us, but they were all going to provide something that was compliant, or they weren't going to get paid on the contract. Whereas many of the other areas where we would like to be involved, there's a lot of contention about, how city staff wants things to be done, a la valet parking, and versus what is required under the law and or interpretation of the law and or, doing the right thing morally. That's where staff in general, not AAC staff, but city staff in general could do better to serve the disabled members of this community.
Thank you, Nick. That's interesting comments. You're right. Since they had to follow the laws of ADA, they all had pretty much the same thing, but I do think it's nice that the one that was picked was the one that we all thought was probably the best. So I think they listened more than just the 10%, but that's just my thought. Okay, the last one is outdoor dining and parklets. I could talk for 2 hours on this. All I'll say is at the end of May of last year, 3 of our members wrote to City Council, Paul Casey, Director of Public Works, and pointed out that we must take care of the accessibility requirements of this new land giveaway to the for-profit restaurateurs. It's almost been a year. Very few things have really been fixed. We found out that no one was really doing the homework. They were just talking to restaurateurs, but no one ever handed out any citations or violation notices. And I know that Brian has some stuff to add here, but this is an example of what Nick mentioned earlier. This outdoor parking, dining and parking subcommittee has been a joke because the people in charge of this have never returned any of my emails for the last 6 months. Just last week, I found out they had a new guideline for parklets. I found some errors in there. They left some stuff out that was in our original guidelines. I mentioned that to that group and no one got back to say thank you, or we goofed, or we'll fix it. And there's also a checklist they have, which has items on the checklist that aren't even on the guidelines. So I don't know how the legal ramifications of that are, but if you hand out guidelines that don't have a certain rule, but it's in a checklist, then it just seems so sloppy. And I hope that Brian can give us some good news on that. But that's all I'm going to say. But it's been terrible because when you write to the director of these projects and there's not even a response. And as you know, 3 months ago, we were supposed to finally get a report. No one showed up, and no one said, no one showed up this time. So that shows how little they care about the accessibility. And since the city council knew about this and the administrator, it's kind of sad that we're still third-class citizens. And I'll stop after that.
I just want to follow up with a quick comment on this item. I will spare all of you any long diatribe or any of my emotions on this. I will just say that I could not be more disappointed with the city's response to this issue.
I'll second that.
Brian, I had a question for you. This is COVID related, I think, with the reopening, assuming reopening and lowering the tier where restaurants and other businesses reopen to allow more indoor access, assuming the continuation of the State Street Promenade, what is the status of the continuation of parklets? Knowing that some seem more permanent than others, but they are temporary structures. Can you give me sort of an idea of the progress of how that goes with the reopening, and if it does go according to, if we attain herd immunity and all that stuff? There's probably too many factors to give any definitive answer, but what do you see as a trend as far as, we did the parklets to access to create more outdoor dining. So what happens when we reopen, and do they continue? Do they pull back? What's the status on that?
Right. I was going to cover this in item number 10, but because the timing, it's more timely to answer your question right now, I'll go ahead and do so.
Okay.
From what I understand, the downtown parking staff are really looking at what's going to be a good recommended revision to how we've been handling outdoor dining once, whether it's June 15th or some future date when 100% indoor dining is allowed. And I think the staff are considering, and I think from an accessibility standpoint, I would encourage this consideration, which would be, the outdoor dining that's taking place on the sidewalk. So not in the street, the dining that's on the sidewalk, that's not previously approved as part of the former outdoor dining program, would need to go away. That's on the table for consideration. I believe there's going to be a council meeting. It may not be this month, it may end up being in June, but to discuss what modifications will take place. And as soon as I know there's a council date set, I'll let the committee know, this Access Advisory Committee know. from an accessibility standpoint, getting all of that stuff out of the sidewalk would make things much easier from a navigational standpoint, and it would still allow for I think some of the parklet activity to continue, but even that would likely be modified. So that's what I'm
Well-
hearing, and there's going to be, I'm sure, a big discussion at the council level.
Well, I'll just
before any
add a
changes are
comment.
made.
Brian, this is Suzanne Tejada. I'll just add a comment to that. No, I think that's great to clean it up a little bit, but sometimes the restaurants only have accessible seating on the sidewalk. You can't even get into the street, or the parklets are not accessible. So you solve one problem, but you create another. That's always the issue. Anyway, just wanted to throw that out there.
This is Chair Marston. I want to make sure Brian understands that the new guidelines never say that the street dining must be accessible. It's kind of assumed, but it's not there. So you can actually, like Suzanne said, you can have a fenced off area in the street with no ramp, and somehow it's not pointed out in the guidelines that you can't do that. You must have access to the area, and that's not even on the guidelines. So that's something that's really a major problem that needs to be fixed as soon as possible. Okay, can we take a 5-minute break?
Yes,
I
sounds
have-
like
Public comment?
Oh, sorry. Are there any public comments on those reports?
Chairman, not see a hand raised, so yes, we can take a break.
Okay, I have 11 o'clock, so we'll check back at 11:05. Good enough? Thank you.
yes.
Sounds good, thanks.
Thank you.
And is Alex Baldo here yet?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
I am,
good.
Chair Marston.
Okay, so this is a street capital program update. And the Access Advisory Committee is going to receive a report on the streets capital program updates from Alex Ubaldo, supervising engineer. Take it away, Alex.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Chair Marston and committee members. My name is Alex Ubaldo. I'll be providing you an update on some of the streets capital projects relating to the accessibility improvements and ADA that we've either recently completed, that are currently in construction, or about to go in construction. And I'm the supervising engineer with Public Works Engineering with the Streets Construction Group. Next slide, please, Sarita.
Oh dear. Is that your slide now? Excuse me one moment, please, while I bring.
Sure, I can go ahead and start talking about, I'll begin with the projects that we recently completed, and you can just catch up with that, Sarita, once you get a chance. So one of the projects I want to talk about is the FY20A pavement maintenance project. This is a slurry seal treatment project. We basically apply a thin layer of slurry seal application as a preventative maintenance effort to extend the life of our city streets. And part of this project, we completed 94 access ramps that were constructed. And these ramps were selected primarily at locations where the streets received the slurry treatment. The exact intersections for the ramp improvements should have been included in the packet that's provided to the committee. And the next slide kind of shows just the overview and the general locations of these access ramps. They're constructed all throughout the city as part of the project. There's some on the Mesa, on the Upper West Side, downtown, the East Side, and they're kind of all represented by the different colored dots on the map.
Excuse me, Alex, is there a way to do a full screen on your PowerPoint?
I am. Please bear with me.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Alex. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Chair Marston, I can certainly provide these maps as well to the committee. And
That would be great.
And I did provide also a list of all of the street intersections where these ramp improvements have actually been completed as well.
Thank you.
And then, so for the FY20B payment project, so this is more of the grind and overlay project. It's a little bit more substantial pavement maintenance effort. This is where we grind a layer of the pavement and place new asphalt. And so as part of this project, the locations are on Santa Barbara Street from Gutierrez to Victoria Street. There's also Anapamu from Anacapa to Garden. And then there's Castillo Street and Bath Street from Mitchell Terrena to Mission Street. So this project is substantially complete. There is a little bit of railing work remaining at the Stearns Wharf, but for the most part, all of the concrete improvements have been completed. And as part of this project, we constructed 81 access ramps. So these are represented by the dots all throughout the location map there. And these are either missing ramps, they're new ramps, or we reconstructed existing ramps in order to make them into compliance. So either install missing truncated domes or reconstructed them to meet slope requirements, etc. So between these two completed projects, we've constructed a total of 175 total access ramps. Next slide, please, Sarita. And now I'll be talking a little bit about the projects that are currently in construction. And so we are starting with the FY21C pavement maintenance project. We did things a little bit differently this fiscal year and created this C project with the pavement maintenance. And this consists primarily of the concrete improvements. And we did this so that we can get the concrete improvements done ahead of the slurry seal, which is our 21A, and also some of the street screw operation and their pavement maintenance effort. Since the street screw have been recently been doing a lot of pavement maintenance work, they've become really efficient at this, and we're doing a lot larger quantities on their maintenance effort. We wanted to go ahead and try to get the work in advance of their effort. So as part of this project, which is currently in construction, we have 47 access ramps that are going to be constructed, and these ramps are mainly in the Oak Park neighborhoods and then also in the Hidden Valley neighborhoods. And then once the contractor is done at the Oak Park, they'll move over to the Hidden Valley neighborhoods. And then after that, the street screw will come in and do some of their pavement maintenance work there. And then also as part of this project, there's about 11,000 square feet of new sidewalk that we are going to be constructing along Hollister Avenue between Frederick Road and Fairview. So that's FY21C. And then the next project, which I'm really excited to talk about because this project is something that I'm personally managing right now, is the Las Positas and Modoc Roads multi-use path project. And this project is funded primarily by an active transportation program grant funds. We've received about $18 million of grant funds to design and construct this project. It will create a separate path for active transportation users, whether you're walking, biking, or running, and also for people with disabilities. It will create a safe path that's going to be completely separate from vehicular traffic. It's 2.6 miles long, and along Modoc, it starts from Calle de los Amigos and goes all the way down to Las Positas. And then it veers south on Las Positas, so from Modoc all the way down to the Cliff Drive Roundabout. So this path is, again, 2.6 miles. It's going to be constructing 29 access ramps, primarily at those intersections along Modoc and Cliff Drive. It's intended to provide, many points of interest in the city, including the Arroyo Burr Beach, Elings Park, and several and will also serve as a local regional connection, providing connection to the Auburn Trail, Goleta Beach, and UCSB. The contractor is currently working along Las Positas right now. They are expected to be substantially complete with this work at the end of the calendar year of this year. And then after that, there's about 6 months of plant establishment period that they're going to be on the hook for. Next slide, please, Sarita. So this is just the map that will show you kind of where these two projects are located. Again, the ramps are represented by the dots there here at the Hidden Valley neighborhood. And then to the right of that is the Oak Park neighborhood. And then next slide, please, Sarita. And then this is the location map for the Las Positas multi-use path project. So Modoc from Calle de los Amigos to Las Positas, and then veer south from Las Positas from Modoc to the Cliff Drive roundabout. Next slide, please. So the next two projects are funded by the Highway Safety Improvement Program grant funds. These are lighting projects. The first one is the Hsip, de Lavina, and Sola corridor lighting project. This is, again, just a lighting and hardscape improvement projects along de Lavina Street between Mitchell Terrena and Haley Street, and then Sola Street between Bath Street and Garden Street. There's a little bit of minor lighting work at Atacapa and also at Garden Street, but we're going to be constructing 11 access ramps with this project. Right now, the contractor has completed all of the boring work to install the conduit, and they're estimated to complete this project by late September. And then the last project that's currently in construction is the Hsip Curio lighting and signal project. This is, again, a lighting project on Curio Street from Miramonte Drive to Bath Street. We're going to be upgrading the traffic signals, reconstructing some of the curb ramps, median islands at Cabrillo and San Andres. And then we're also going to be reconstructing curb ramps, installing a new median island, and mid-block crossings at Cabrillo and San Pascual. So this project is, we just recently got bids last week, and we are going to be planning to award a construction contract in the next month or so. Oh, and then I also forgot to mention that this project also has a little bit of grind and overlay work on Cabrillo Street from San Andres to the west side of Chapala Street. And there's going to be 10 total access ramps that is going to be reconstructed as part of this project. So we plan to award in the next month in June and likely start construction this summer. And so with all of those 4 projects currently in construction, we have about 94 total ramps that's going to be anticipated to be constructed at the completion of these projects. So again, this is a location map for the Hsip, de Lavina, and Sola corridor lighting project. And then next slide, please, Sarita. This is the location map for the Hsip Curio lighting and signal project. So the pink represents the lighting corridor improvements that we're going to be installing. The yellow is the grind and overlay work, and then the ramps and sidewalk are represented by the 2 dots at those 2 intersections that I mentioned. Next slide, please, Sarita. And then the last 2 projects I want to talk about are the projects that's currently in final design. These projects will be going to construction soon. So we have the FY21B pavement maintenance project. This is the grind and overlay project. We have selected and are finalizing the streets that will be part of this project. It's mainly on Arriaga, a small sliver of Fairview, Castillo, Mitchell Terrena, Chapala, and Mission Streets. Those limits are also provided in that same handout. And we are estimating 57 access ramps that will be constructed as part of this project. It's going to out to bid this July with an anticipated summer construction. And then the last project is the Los Patos Cabrillo Roundabout project. So this project is actually part of the Union Pacific Railroad Bridge Replacement Project at the intersection of Cabrillo Boulevard and Highway 101. This is really an effort between the city and SB-CAG to get this project completed in parallel with the US 101 widening project. But the roundabout portion is being constructed ahead of the 101 widening project. And so this project is expected to go out to bid this fall, while the construction of the UPRR bridge replacement will likely be a few years after that. So as part of this roundabout project, we have 8 access ramps that we're installing and also 5,000 square foot of new sidewalk. and out to bid the fall with a late fall, early winter start of construction. So those are our projects that we've completed, are currently in construction, and are currently in final design, ready to go instructions. And thank you for having me here today.
Thank you very much, Alex. That was very exciting and interesting. I have two questions. You mentioned UCSB and Goleta Beach access. That would be the part of Modoc that you're fixing. Is that correct?
Correct. So
Okay.
we are our portion of the project goes from Calle Dos Amigos to Las Positas. We are coordinating with the county to design the small piece that will be done from Calle Dos Amigos to the county city limits, and the county is currently, I believe they're currently in final design of their project to do their multi-use path that will connect to the Auburn Trail. They should be going out to construction for that project soon as well.
Great. I remember when I was a youngster, a few years back, I used to ride my bike out there. That Modoc part was tricky on a bicycle with the traffic and stuff. So that's a good thing to know. The other one, quick question. San Andreas and Curio, you're actually redesigning the intersection, correct? To make it more orthogonal, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Anything you can share on that quickly? Just getting rid of the curves and the angles, is that what you're doing?
Yeah, they're making some lighting signal upgrade improvements at that intersection, and also redesigning some of the curb extensions. That project is actually, like I said, it was just, we recently got bids for it. I haven't taken a look at the plans yet in that much details, other than, you know, we're making safety intersection improvements at that intersection.
Thanks. And from Derek Bailey, he says that that place is also to get a fully functional, accessible pedestrian signal at that corner, which is very important, I think. Thank you so much. Any other questions?
Alex, this is Bob. A couple questions. I noticed you mentioned Hollister out by Frederick and Fairview. So are you folks doing cross projects with the city of Goleta and Santa Barbara County?
So that small sliver of sidewalk improvements, which I think you're talking about at Hollister Avenue, where we're constructing 11,000 square feet, is actually owned by the city. So we.
Oh, okay. Okay. And then the other question, notice I take walks in the neighborhood east of State Street between Mitchell Terrena and Mission, and sometimes north of Mission. And I notice some of the streets still have no curb cuts on some of the corners. Is there a priority to fill in more curb cuts on the north-south streets as opposed to the side streets going east-west? What's the priority there?
Yeah, our priority definitely has, we want to try to obviously make install curb ramps where they're currently missing. We do have categories in which we prioritize these curb ramps as far as, you know, their location to hospitals, parks, points of interest, and so forth. But for the most part, the way we're selecting these projects currently has to do with the locations of our pavement maintenance projects. So wherever we're doing the slurry seal applications, the grind and overlay, we take a look at those ramps that are missing within those streets and incorporate them as part of the project, or create, you know, like this one, the FY21C, create a new project where we're moving ahead of the slurry seal project or the street screw operations.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? If not, are there public comments on this?
Mr. Chairman, I do not see any hands raised. If participants would like to make public comment, you can press *9 to raise your hand, and I will put you into the public comment.
I do have a quick question about the Los Patos train trestle. Is that, I know that I believe that's the train trestle that is frequently hit by tall vehicles. Is that part of this project?
Yes, it is. It's not part of this roundabout project because this project is going to be constructed ahead of that. But the Los Patos underpass, that bridge is going to be replaced as part of the UPRR bridge replacement project. So our agreement with UPRR, they've actually asked us to remove that Los Patos bridge and fill it in with dirt. So that will be incorporated as part of that project, which will be constructed after this roundabout project.
So we're removing the off-ramp, or they're raising the height of the trestle, or?
The off-ramp is going to be removed as part of the Highway 101 widening project.
Got it.
Okay, any discussion on this?
Well, I have a quick question, sort of housekeeping, and that is for these curb cuts, will the raised domes be yellow like we've been asking for? Is there some note in the construction specs?
Yes, we are following our standard details, which is the yellow truncated domes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else for Alex? But I want to thank you very much for that great report. I appreciate your work.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, item 10 is State Street. Recommendation that the Access Advisory Committee receive a report on outdoor dining and the State Street Advisory Committee recruitment. And I think that would be Brian.
Yes, thank you again, Chair Marston. And just a quick time check here. We're at 11:27. We have 2 items left that I think the committee is probably most interested in getting through. And I believe there may even be some action taken by the committee on one or both of these items. So I just want to make sure that the committee members who are on board right now are able to stay until at least noon.
I don't have a hard stop. I have plenty of time.
I'm fine.
I'm good.
I'm available.
I'm also available.
All right.
Okay.
Unanimous.
All
Thank
right.
you, Brian.
Yep. So let's do our best to make great use of this next half hour. On State Street, we've heard a little bit already in the subcommittee report. I really want to get to the moving forward piece of this, which is probably more the second 2 bullet points, but I do believe it's important to let the committee know what has been happening since February 12th. That was the last Access Advisory Committee, the infamous Access Advisory Committee meeting. So since then, after that meeting, Mr. Dayton and I immediately started communication with the city attorney's office on enforcement. And it was clear, unfortunately, that until that point, we hadn't done anything that in the eyes of the city attorney counted towards enforcement. So in some ways, we were starting from scratch on February 12th. And that was disappointing, but not enough to discourage us. We put every effort. Rob basically moved his office from Garden Street, Rob Dayton, and he's been up at the Granada Garage working there feverishly, in the absence of Victor Garza, who did retire, if folks were wondering. His last day was the day before the last Access Advisory Committee meeting. So we've been working with the attorney's office and creating a case file that satisfies them to go down this path of enforcement, and that has taken some time. We had to polish up our checklists, our forms, and how we go about documenting and notifying. And just late last month, beginning of this month, we've been able to send out notice of violations. And you see there, it says 10 have been issued. I think there might be as many as 8 that could go out today. And the follow-up on this can be really quick. So the 10 that went out, there's follow-up inspections happening today, and the, kind of the progressive enforcement begins to take place if they do not mitigate the violations. So that's, I guess, a good news, bad news story. The bad news is that we're still seeing the violations. The good news is we're now able, we have this system in place that's supported by the attorney's office to go down the enforcement path. And I believe once we start issuing even more of these, I believe the compliance is finally going to go up. The conversations and the requests maybe got some people to comply, but like we were talking with the ADA parking violations, unless there's going to be some kind of a monetary consequence, sometimes it's hard to get anybody's attention. So that is the latest on that. I guess one other thing, going back to conversations with other ADA coordinators, I heard that City of Pasadena, what they did when they closed their street was rented ramps from the curb to the street level. They took the initiative to rent the ramps with handrails and provided them to every business that was operating in the right of way. So that was interesting to hear that approach, and of course wished we had done the same thing and had the foresight to know that this would have been going on for a year plus. And even if it was only a month, it still would have been
I had the forethought.
a good move to do that. What was that? Mr. Coons?
I said that I had the foresight. I saw this coming miles and miles away, and said it to anybody who would listen.
Committee member Coons, I did hear the concerns, and unfortunately, yes, we're here now a year out and trying to rectify these violations. That is the update on enforcement. I would like to.
Brian, this is Suzanne Teata.
Yes.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Mhm.
So now, as of February of this year, you have now been able to enforce the violations, whereas previously the attorney did not see that as an option. So what changed?
Well, I would say, before February, we weren't doing anything that in the eyes of an attorney counted, walking around telling people you got to move this, you got to move that, you have to do this, you have to do that. What's the famous line that you always hear from attorneys, right? If it isn't in writing, it never happened. So
what
we weren't building up that case file. And we needed to begin doing that basically once we sat down with the attorneys. After Victor left, Rob Dayton and I got together and met with the attorney's office to figure out, okay, what is it going to take now at this point? And they kind of laid out the steps that were necessary. And we realized then that we were starting from scratch, unfortunately.
So the printed guidelines and, the pamphlets, and that was all recommendation, but there was no legal consequence. There was nothing legal about that.
Nothing that would really count as a step in the enforcement process. And that was a learning lesson for staff, because we felt like they've been notified to death on this. They've received updates on guidelines and all kinds of opportunities to know what they needed to do. So That was the
Well,
difference, is just kind of
Yeah.
finally sitting down with the attorney's office
Yeah.
and outlining, what is it gonna take to get from here to there?
Well, thank you for doing that. And so, yeah, that's good. That's good. Step in the right direction.
Note to self, include the attorney's office earlier in these
Yes.
discussions.
And I
Well,
will
my
be your,
experience has been that the attorney's office is very reluctant to get involved when the requests come from our committee.
Yeah, and my experience is staff is the general bigger picture staff, not AAC staff, is very reluctant to include the city attorney's office in any discussion.
And the city attorney likes it that way, is my impression.
and this is Jim, and I'll be a jerk to point out I have written to Downtown Parking since June saying, please send me copies of your reports. And it turns out, as Brian said, no one was doing anything on paper, but I kept asking for that and no one would even answer my question. But I saw that coming. I said, please show me what's been done. Give me the data, give me some sheets.
This
So
has been by design, Jim. It
I-
just
I-
like the
I
attorney
understand.
said, if
Yeah.
it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So that's how
Right.
they've gotten away with this for a year.
I know, but it's a total marginalization of the disabled community in this
I
town.
know. I mean, I should
Okay.
be applauding. I'm going to give a golf clap.
Okay.
I should be applauding these notices of violation.
Yes.
It's a step in the right direction, but I mean, a year later, it's
I believe it.
ridiculous.
We can't call this on Brian at all. I'm just happy it's finally happening. I just want everybody to know that these things were brought up a year ago, and
Well,
they just ignored the whole
Well,
thing.
that is why we need to meet more often, because we have been the driving force behind this. Absolutely the only driving force behind this.
Right. And I
So
want to
Brian,
thank.
what does it take to get the city attorney's office attention? Do we approach city council? Do we approach Paul Casey, Matt Four? Who do we approach to, I'm not even going to say I hate to be a nag or a pest because I don't anymore. I mean, what do we do to get their attention to listen to us?
I don't see the point in entertaining a response. We've been asking this for a year. What we should have done a year ago is organized a sit-in and gotten the media's attention and made this a big, vote of public opinion, because this has been a complete exercise in obstructionism, and there's no response you're going to get right now that's going to prevent this from happening in the future.
And I'll throw in one more comment. Brian, you've talked about the ad hoc committees, and this is an example of you write to them and they don't get back to you. And so the ad hoc committee has no say and no power at all. And so maybe you could think, what will happen on the next ad hoc when we write to some group and say, we need to talk about this. Here's 3 questions, and they never respond. What do you do when you can't get a response from a city department? So I don't want an answer now, but you've got to think about that, because that's where we're stuck with these ad hocs. Like with the police, we've tried for 2 or 3 years to have them come, and you finally got some answers after 2 or 3 years, and that's not right. In a democracy, no. So anyway, just think about that and let me know later. But thank you for doing this. I'm glad to see there's at least 10 notices of violations.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you who they were, but I won't, because I'm sure that's private, but it'd be nice to have some action going on. So thank you,
Well-
Brian, for that.
Well, it shows it's possible.
Wait, why can't we ask who they are? This should be a matter of public record.
Well, I agree with you, Nick, but I'm sure that they'll have a reason not to. So I'm not even going to ask for it. If Brian wants to share, I'd love to hear the 10 notices so I could go down there and see. Can you share any of those, Brian?
I haven't seen the list. I don't think that there would be a reason why we couldn't.
Okay.
And I'll try to get that information out.
Please do, because I'll be your eyes and ears as soon as I get that list. I won't make any hassle there. I'll just go and look and let you know. Thank you. That'd be good to have those lists
Yeah.
constantly updated.
and then I can take them off of my list and send you an update of the ones who still need notices.
Very good. We're on our
Well,
way.
But
One thing-
again, I resent having to be involved in enforcement.
Yes.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the other two bullet points here?
Yes.
Great. Okay, State Street guidelines. This is what we started talking about a little bit in the subcommittee. I think it was when we were in subcommittee reports. So I was able to get confirmation. I had mentioned something about a possible meeting in May. There is a meeting on May 25th. It's the regular council meeting, Tuesday, May 25th, where there will be a discussion on, I believe it says parklet design guidelines. It may be more encompassing than just the parklets, but that is an opportunity for sure for the committee to get involved. If today they want to make, if this committee today wants to make some kind of a recommendation to staff about what that what they would like to see in updated guidelines, they could do that. It may be more, it's hard to say because I don't know what this discussion on the 25th is going to look like. And this plays into, are our meetings frequent enough? I was going to say it may be more appropriate to watch that meeting and then come up with comments, but I'd hate to put you guys behind. But it's an opportunity if the committee wants to talk about guidelines, at least certain key things that they would want to look for. But
I mean,
yeah, I just wanted to let you all know that that meeting is coming up and to not miss out on the
provided
opportunity.
extensive guidelines, recommendations. They keep getting culled from the list that Rob puts out. And I think that it's ridiculous that we're still having this conversation.
And Brian, you are talking about ADA guidelines for the parklets, correct? And the dining?
I'm thinking more about what is State Street going to look like in this time period between now and March. You know, the emergency order was extended until March 2022, I believe. So this interim period of time, we're going to be discussing at the council level some changes. Right now, you know, there a lot is allowed in terms of outdoor dining on the sidewalks, parklets, or outdoor dining in the street. And you know, what's going to happen once businesses can open 100% indoors? How much of that is going to be asked to come off the street or off the sidewalk? That's more what we're talking about, as opposed to the little tweaks to the guidelines that we've been seeing since they were first published.
Chair Marston, you provided a list of accessibility issues in the public right of way as it relates to State Street and dining. And is that correct?
Yes, the subcommittee got them a list. We looked at different towns and we gave them a list.
Yep. Okay. So you may need to dust that off and repost it, because it's clear that, you know, that list is not being tracked on the staff side. It's just reminding me of my experience with the blue curb and having to resubmit the blue curb asks, you know, a half a dozen times. So I think it's apparent that you're going to need to bring that back to the forefront and raise it every time this question comes up, because they're not tracking it.
Okay, thank you. But I think that Brian's talking more about what do we want to do with sidewalk dining, how many parklets can be allowed. I mean, it's kind of like a shanty town in some of those areas.
Yeah,
And I also noticed that nothing's been done on enforcing off of State Street.
but to my way of thinking, it's the same kind of issues, you know, as far as it relates to accessibility, whether it's, you know, individual parklets or the bigger picture. You know, we want to see open paths of travel. We want to see ramps. We want to see, you know, accessible tables. We want to see accessible bar heights, you know,
Yes.
and it's a short list. It shouldn't be that
Right.
hard for them to keep track of.
Okay, well, Suzanne, I'd like to, since you are the only member left on the subcommittee, can you contact me in the next week or so? We could start talking about this, what we would like
Yes.
to. Okay,
Mhm.
very good. And we
Yeah.
do have an opening on that committee if anyone wants to join in.
I just have a comment from the downtown parking committee side of things, and it was my impression that aesthetics was the real issue that was coming up, not
Yes.
any of our concerns, strictly aesthetics.
Yeah.
Sure. If you look at the new guidelines, it's mostly aesthetics. What colors are allowed, not what people are allowed.
Yeah.
So the colors
That's
are more important than
not
the
just
people.
That's not just true with this issue with the parklets. That's true with the general approach of the city in any city project. The aesthetics always outweighs accessibility.
Sure. They used to fight the tactile domes about aesthetics. And then when they went to yellow, they said, well, no, that doesn't fit in our aesthetics. So yeah, you're right, Bob. It's overwhelmingly it's aesthetics, but the guidelines show completely that it's aesthetics and not people.
Mhm.
All right. Well, if I
Or
could
the
talk to,
law, you know, let's
Oh.
put aside the ethical people question.
Right.
It's the legal requirement that I think should be at the forefront.
we don't need your stinking badges. Okay. Well, I'll talk to Suzanne. Thank you.
Okay, and then lastly here on this item is, hopefully it's just a reminder, but the city council has chosen to establish this State Street Advisory Committee, which will be guiding the production of a downtown State Street area master plan. This committee is going to consist of 15 members. There'll be 3 council members, 1 member from the Planning Commission, 1 member from the HLC, and then there will be 10 open seats. I believe 3 of the 10 open seats are going to be assigned to a downtown property owner, a downtown business owner, and or a business organization representative. So what that tells me is there's really 7 seats available for the general public. And looking through the materials that are online, I see that they're looking for the advisory committee to provide input on lots of different things, but it does include equity and accessibility. So I was glad to see that that was listed.
Brian,
And
what is
it's
the application?
also,
What is the application deadline?
May 20.
yes.
Okay.
So the applications are due on May 20th. And interviews are scheduled for June 8th or June 15th.
I would like to ask Sarita to
And they
send out.
do,
Oh, sorry. Could you just send out the application to us all? Sarita?
Would like me to send you the application.
Yeah.
I
Or a
believe
link.
it's an online form, so we could send out a link to the website.
Now, as Brian said, there's nothing that says it has to be someone from the AAC or someone who's disabled. So I had written to Suzanne once saying that I think she should be on it because she's an architect and has a disability. And I
Well,
think-
Jim, I'm gonna apply. I'm gonna apply.
Oh, you're, okay.
Yes, and
That's-
I have the application already downloaded, and I know the deadline is May 20th. This was sent out through the AIA as well. They've been advertising that.
Okay,
So I definitely plan on applying. As
So glad to hear that. And,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you'll be getting a recommendation from me.
yeah, and
Yeah,
as
we're all relieved to know that you're applying.
Yes, I am going to do that. As an AIA architect member and as a member of this committee. Yes, so I will do that.
Well, thank you very much on behalf of all of us.
We'll see
Yes.
if I get in. We'll see.
Well,
It sounds like the competition's pretty stiff.
Jim, do you
So-
think Jim, do you think it would be wise if someone else on the AAC applied along with Suzanne? Because I might be willing to do that if I don't want to compete with her or X her out. I'd like to see her definitely on the committee, but would it be wise if someone else applied as well?
Are you thinking of yourself?
Bob,
Yes.
I remember from city council discussion about this, that the process was going to be, the selection process was going to be largely based on qualifications and letters of reference and recommendation from the community. So I suspect that from council's perspective, Suzanne, as an architect would be more qualified, and that our recommendations and letter of reference or whatever would probably go further to serving the interests of the disabled public than diluting the pool with more applicants.
Very good. Then I will send city council and city clerk's office, whoever it is, I'll send them a glowing letter of reference for Suzanne.
Suzanne, since you've already looked at the application, does it really
Yes.
state what Nick has said, which I kind of remember, that you do have to have letters of recommendation? And do you put
I
those
did
in
not-
the application?
I did not see that. Looking at it right now.
Okay.
Can I ask, since this is agendized discussion, can we entertain a motion to send a recommendation from this committee to council to accept the application of Suzanne Tejeda to this committee?
Suzanne,
Well,
do you
I'm
think
asking procedurally of staff, can we
Right.
bring a vote and send this recommendation from this committee?
Right, so committee member Kuntz, I was thinking about that myself. I know you guys are trying to make this carry a little bit more weight, and I think some form of an action taken by this committee may do that. I'm trying to think, within the confines of this committee is advisory to staff. I'm trying to think,
Well, maybe-
who would the recommendation go to? But if you
So-
keep it just kind of general,
So I'm looking at the application. There's two questions. Why do you want to be on the committee? And what personal professional experiences, kind of the same questions that we have for the other applications. But there is going to be an interview part of this recruitment. So maybe at that point, the letters of recommendation can be submitted. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then Suzanne, I'll just be honest here. Do you think that having the AAC or disabled people behind you would hurt you?
No.
Okay.
No,
I don't think that.
I think you can refer to the minutes of this meeting for our endorsement for your representing us.
Right.
Why
Right.
not?
And I think separate letters from us might be even better than something signed by the committee. That's my thought.
I would want to overwhelm them with more than less.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I think that will speak more to the recommendation if we all do it. But I also think that if there was a unanimous consensus, that might also speak volumes as well.
That'd be good. Brian, can you look and see what you think about us having a formal letter from the committee itself besides individual letters, and let us know as soon as possible by email?
Well, we don't
So-
have another meeting, so if we're
No,
gonna
So-
vote on-
Just by email, I'm saying.
On the application, it says only one additional page of information may be attached to this application. So I could attach maybe a letter from the committee to my application as, I don't know. Maybe that would be one. way
Sounds
to
like
do
a
it.
good idea.
Okay, so how do we sign this letter then, Brian?
That is a good question, and
Can it come
it's
from
not
you
something that
saying,
I've seen.
okay, here's a
I-
thought.
I think-
How about if Brian just writes a letter saying, because of our discussion, all the members of the committee would like to support this and then give the reasons, but sent in by you. Therefore, it's not an official letter from the committee, but from the head of the committee. Then we don't have to vote on anything.
Jim, I like Barbara's idea of extracting, an excerpt from the minutes, and endorsing Suzanne
May
as the
the
committee's
meeting
recommendation.
minutes reflect that that Suzanne Tejeda has unanimous support from this committee to join
To
the
represent
state,
us.
to represent
Yeah,
us at the
and-
State Street Advisory Committee?
If the committee wanted, I mean, they could make a motion to recommend or to endorse, or whatever word you want to choose, that committee member Tejada apply for
Be
the
selected.
State
be
Street Advisory
selected for.
Committee.
Be
Yeah, be
selected for.
selected for, even better.
So moved.
Whatever language it's your motion, so I don't want to write it, but
Yeah.
I think it's within your purview to
Okay.
do that.
So that answers my original question. We can procedurally do that. And then what we choose to do with that action later in terms of her recruitment and interview efforts can be determined later, whether that comes as a letter from you, or whether that comes as an attachment from her, or we reference it in our personal recommendations. It could come many different ways, but as long as we have the motion carries, that's what I think is important. So I'd like to recommend that we entertain a motion that this committee recommend Suzanne Tejeda to be approved to the State Street Advisory Committee.
That the motion?
Yes.
I second.
I guess a roll call. Do we want to put any more in there, like her architectural?
That'll speak for itself.
Okay,
That will be in my application.
Right.
okay, sure.
Right, all
Okay,
they're asking for is that some group, as a group, endorse somebody, and we now, as a group, are endorsing her.
okay, let's have a roll call and make it official.
Chairman Marston,
Hey, aye.
Vice Chair Burnham,
Aye.
Mr. Koontz,
Aye.
Ms. Silver,
Aye.
and
I don't know if I can vote on this one, can I?
I'm thinking, I don't think you can, and then
No.
you don't have a quorum.
We don't have a quorum.
You can
Sure we do.
abstain.
You can't,
I can't.
you
I have
can't
to
vote
How
for
abstain.
can
yourself
how can we
either,
not have a
No.
quorum?
We have 4 out of 6.
because Michael Ressler is missing.
Yes, we have 4 out of 6.
1, 2, 3, 4. You do have a quorum. You're correct.
Yes, we do.
Okay,
Okay,
You scared us.
I know.
okay. It's passed. That'll be in a minute.
Sorry, I haven't stood since 7:30 this morning.
Okay,
So in my application, I can refer to the minutes that I have your support.
And endorse.
Endorsement. Okay, I'll put that in my written.
Are
application.
unanimous endorsement?
Yes,
Okay.
unanimous endorsement.
Okay, well, thank you, guys.
without even you having to vote. Now,
I hope I don't disappoint.
Thank you for being willing to do it. Because
yes.
Yes.
Now, last question. Do you think we need to send in a copy of that?
Yeah,
That,
just let
I don't
her
think so.
handle it in her application.
okay,
I would say.
okay. Thank you all for that. And thank you, Suzanne, for doing that.
Sure.
Okay, Brian,
Miss-
thanks.
Meaningful action from this committee. I love it.
Yes. Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
we do have public, you have a public comment. Accessible Santa Barbara, I believe, has been waiting to speak.
Okay,
Good morning. Can you hear me?
yes.
Morning.
Hi, everybody. This is Will Railing. And I have, I guess, about 3 compliments and 2 questions for Brian. So first compliment, your transition to Zoom. Great idea. I participate in a lot of accessibility meetings around the state. I think you all know I actually live in San Francisco and am active with Accessible San Francisco and in a lot of other state and local accessibility context. And there's been a real movement to Zoom for a superior accessibility. So kudos on that. Second compliment is just, you know, listening to this committee today. I mean, it's really become a dream team in my opinion. And, you know, I am just so impressed with the commitment and intelligence and expertise that you're all bringing to bear on these really important issues. I mean, honestly, I sort of visualize a Avengers 9 movie, you know, that the ADA Enforcement League, you know, starring you all. And I'll leave you to figure out whose superpower is the cutting remark. You know, and that's limited to 4 meetings a year. So, you know, I'd like to see a sequel, Avengers 10, where the Avengers can actually meet 12 times a year. And I suppose that would be subtitled Avengers 10, ADA Enforcement League Unchained. Third compliment, I appreciate that Brian is just putting in a tremendous amount of effort on the enforcement issue and I understand it's focused on the 8 blocks of State Street that are closed. Okay, but you guys deserve all the credit in the world for everything you're doing. It sounds like a bit of a ground war, you know, trying to get enforcement on those 8 blocks. Now I have 2 questions for Brian. Which hopefully I think he can answer. And just the first is I think he mentioned the issue, something about coming to City Council soon regarding State Street, and I'm guessing that may be before this committee meets again. So I was hoping he could say a little more about what he's expecting. I can tell you that in San Francisco, I've been, you know, very involved with a current proposal to actually make the parklets permanent. And I expect many other cities will start to consider that issue. And I don't think that's necessarily what's happening next, but if he could just say a few words about what he thinks or is expecting the next city council action to be, maybe that would be of some use. My second question for Brian is in his capacity as one of the most important and knowledgeable people in the Public Works Department. And this question excludes those 8 blocks of the city and deals with the other thousands of blocks of the city. So I'm assuming that Public Works must be aware of every parklet that's been built. In other words, the parklets on Coast Village Road, the parklets, you know, in the Funk Zone on Santa Barbara Street and Helena Avenue, parklets on San Andreas, I think it's just an essential function, and Public Works always impresses me with its competency that I'm assuming Public Works must know of everything that's going on in the public right of way. So my question is how are you made aware of the parklets that are on Coast Village Road? And I understand this is not about the enforcement, and I understand that this we're not talking about State Street right now or any of the enforcement activities. It's more just how is there a master list? I mean, since there aren't public works permits, there aren't building permits, I would just really like to hear a little about how does Public Works even know of the parklets and Coast Village Road, et cetera. So, all right, thank you very much, you guys. Keep up the great work, and I'm so happy to hear that committee member Tejeda is going to be applying for that spot on the State Street committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you, Will.
Okay, if I answered these questions?
Yes.
Please do.
All right, so 2 questions. One is kind of what's happening next with State Street and parklets. And I think there's 2 things that are happening. What the committee just recommended committee member Tejada for is the longer term vision of State Street. What's State Street going to look like 5 years, 10 years from now, whenever some major overhaul takes place? So that's great that we've got an architect and somebody who can represent the Access Advisory Committee plugged in to that, and wish her well on that application process. The other piece is what's going to happen in between. There's still this emergency ordinance out there that allows for basically everything that's happening out there today to continue until March. But there's an interest, all kinds of different interests, as we heard. Some of it is purely aesthetic, but a lot of it has to do with accessibility in terms of from now till March, what are we going to do with State Street? Does it make sense to have all the stuff that's out there right now continue? Or do we need to clean some of that up and, recognizing that the businesses are going to be able to go back fully indoors at some point? So that's the conversation that's kind of the nearer term with this May 25th, I believe it is, council meeting. I'll be part of that conversation. So hopefully that answers the question. I don't know that they'll sort it all out in one meeting, because we don't even know, when will the 100% indoor thing happen? Is it going to be June 15th? We've heard from the governor that California is going to be fully open on June 15th. I'm not sure we know yet what that really means. There was talk about all the tiers. The tier system would go away at that point. We've certainly been trending in a good direction on COVID, but it still seems a lot of unknown out there. So I hope that answers the first question. And then on the second one, I'd like to think that we're aware of everything that's happening in the public right of way. But there's a lot of stuff that happens out there, whether it's private work that should receive a public works permit and for some reason doesn't, or, like what we heard about earlier today, somebody's just got decorations or things that, it's spilling out into the right of way. We don't always catch all those things. So we're on top of a lot of things. We can't be there for everything. With the parklets, there's the application process that was initially developed was basically allowing them to go and build it, take pictures of what they built, email it to the city, and we'd kind of bring them into the system that way. So it was a little bit of an after the fact. I wouldn't call it a permitting process, but that was the process. It was extremely accommodating. And that's been tightened up some now. The way I understand it is you can't do this, build it and then let us know kind of a thing. But, despite that process, we do here and there find out about a parklet that got built that we weren't notified about, and we'll put that on our list. We have a roster, a list of all the whether it's a parklet or an expanded outdoor dining area, we have a list of all of those citywide. Yes, a lot of the focus has been on State Street, but we have a list and there may be a few that are not on the list that are out there, but hopefully
Brian,
we're
can
at
I
the
ask you,
99% level.
can we see the list? Is the list posted someplace? So if we see something in our own neighborhood, we know to look to see, has it been posted or not?
Yeah, I can get that list from downtown parking.
Good, because I'm not downtown much, but I am in my neighborhood where all sorts of things pop up.
Brian, this is Jim. Thanks for that. I have a question. You said expanded outdoor dining. I've noticed a lot of places, or some places I should say, are just taking over the sidewalk with tables, but they don't have a parklet or anything. They just have used the sidewalk. Is that something that you're aware of when people do that?
Generally, yes, we are
Okay.
aware of that. And that's part of what's on the table, I think, for May 25th to talk about whether we want that to be able to continue.
Okay, I noticed last week I mentioned to you the black sheep that seem to have a lot of tables on the sidewalk. So those kind of things you think you're aware of or should be, right?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. And since Will brought up the Zoom, I want to remind you that Sarah Gorman, the city clerk, asked me to get feedback on what you guys think about Zoom compared to GoToWebinar. And because of the Brown Act, I'd ask you to write to Sarita if you have any comments on which one you prefer or what, because like I said, we're the test bed for Zoom. If we like it and other people are happy with it, then they're going to try to get the whole city to change over. So please write to Sarita if you have any comments at all about Zoom versus GoToWebinar. Thank you. Okay, well, our last one is something that Nick's been waiting 3 years for, the Blue Curb update. We're going to hear from Brian about his good news, I hope, on Blue Curbs. Take it away, Brian.
Okay, and if anybody needs to go, please let me know. I'm still good to keep going here, and this is an important item. So
yes.
All right, Blue Curb. So I believe we've made some substantial progress on this in the last, I would say, month or so. There's been work happening even before that, and I've kind of broken this out into citywide, and then we've got residential and commercial or downtown. On the citywide, I just want to remind everyone that we have this resource page. You've heard about it earlier in the meeting online, where you can go, and really thanks largely to committee member Kuntz of developing this tool that now is being maintained. And thank you, Sarita, for figuring out how to receive that information and get it on our website, where we're maintaining it, is this Blue Curb inventory, where you can go online and see where the blue curbs are located throughout the city. And we have now a process where if anything gets added, we have a pretty simple way of updating that tool. On the residential side, we now have drafted a policy that outlines the process for requesting an accessible parking zone and the criteria the city will use to evaluate those requests. We anticipate that policy will be published shortly. I don't have a precise timeline on that. In the meantime, downtown parking continues to review these requests as they receive them. And I'm aware of, I think, three or four new locations that have been approved and they're scheduled for completion. They may already be completed. I haven't checked myself, but we've got one on Wade Court, which is near Allen Road, one on 116 West Ortega, another at 1319 Carpinteria Street, and another at 836 West Sola Street. So once those are in, once we have confirmation that those have been completed, we will update the online map to show that. And our goal is to keep the blue zones in the residential areas current, because they're often requested by a resident who lives there, and as they come and go, the need may disappear. The blue curb doesn't automatically go away. So trying to come up with a regular process to make sure that the need is still there, and not have the blue curbs, if they're no longer needed, not have them continue there indefinitely.
Brian,
So
a
that's
couple
the
questions.
update on residential.
Brian, couple questions. Was the one ever recovered at Chapala and Canon Perdido that was removed? Was that going to be recovered? And also the one, I think there was a question about one at Canon Perdido and State. I'm not sure what the status was on that one either.
I don't know for those two locations, but we can look into that and get back to you.
I can speak to my recollection, rather, was downtown parking staff explained that near Chapala at Canon Perdido, the reason for that curb being blue in the first place was to service the GTE building, which just hasn't been GTE in a long time. It was no longer being used as an office building. I guess it's now just filled with a bunch of electronic equipment, and there's not a lot of staff entering that building. They felt it was no longer needed. It was removed, and there isn't really a plan to bring it back. I'm seeing here that staff is now agreeable to bringing these removals to us before removing them, and we may have an opportunity to plead a case against removal in the future. So that's positive. And I'm also seeing with the repurposing of existing red curbs in 0-100 blocks, it seems like we might have an opportunity to replace this, what would be the 100 block curb in any event. So I'm hopeful there as well.
Thanks, Nick. Okay.
Okay, so yes, moving on to commercial, I guess with the slide up, you kind of see where that is headed. We got some information from committee member Kuntz, I think probably resending information that he's provided to us. I believe this is the item that we said has been kind of stalled since 2019. So there's been some recent back and forth with some of the committee members on this item who are part of the subcommittee. And I reached out to downtown parking staff, and there seems to be some not just interest, but willingness to try to come up with a plan to take advantage of these red curb areas. Now that with State Street being closed, you've got all these side streets with red curb that was established because it was needed for sight lines for turning movements. Those turning movements no longer exist. So it's a great opportunity to take advantage of that and to repurpose those red curbs into accessible parking. They exist at the end of the blocks, which is where, for the public right-of-way accessibility guidelines, that's where you want to site the blue curbs without having to get into a whole bunch of hardscape improvements. So it looks like there's a real pathway to move forward to put in a number of new accessible parking spaces along all of these cross streets adjacent to the State Street Plaza or Promenade, whatever you want to call it. And if we can find locations that don't have obstructions like traffic signal cabinets or utility poles or signage can be moved relatively easily sometimes. But if we can find the right locations for these, I believe we can move quite quickly on implementation. So my recommendation would be to have the appropriate staff, which would probably be Derek Bailey and maybe one or two folks from downtown parking and myself, meet on site and start looking at these locations. And if the subcommittee on this item is interested in being a part of that, I think it would be helpful for the process.
Absolutely.
To make sure, if we're at a certain intersection, it could make more of a difference. If the blue curb is on one side of the street or the other side of the street, just little things like that may not make as much of a difference to staff. We'd like to get the input from the committee and try to get going on this. It's been stalled out for too long.
Happy to participate in those discussions. Thank you.
Nick, just to make
Okay.
sure, we agree that the best place would be where the back end of your vehicle is next to the access ramp, correct?
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
right,
To accommodate rear loading wheelchair vans.
exactly. So,
That would ensure that there's nobody gonna come up and park behind you and block that
right,
access, and also give you the most protected access to the curb break or intersection. Your bullet point here, second to the last one, asking for input for the subcommittee on locations. I think that would be my first recommendation. The first spot on a curb face closest to the corner ramp. I had previously put out a map with proposing adding simply 7 new parking spaces a block off of State Street that would give a broader coverage, but with maybe less density than we might get with these new available red curbs. So I would like staff to revisit that map as you begin to contemplate moving forward on this. That was, a kind of my first stab at how we could make some simple changes that would give a broad improvement. I would like to see if we're going, I don't think we have the same opportunity at the block off State Street. We're not losing red curb. We're not gaining inventory of parking space at Chapala and Anacapa. But I would still like to see some more thought at the blocks off of the 100 blocks as well. I'm thrilled by the 0-100 block opportunity. I don't want to lose sight of the need at the 100 block, and still want to further that discussion.
Thank you, Nick. Can I suggest that you and Suzanne try to get together and make something that Brian can take to the other people and get the ball rolling? It looks like a great opportunity to jump in.
Yeah,
But I agree that the 100 block does need something too, but not as many perhaps.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's good news, I think. Are there
Yeah, I
any
agree.
other?
This is a lot of forward progress. You know, almost every one of these is a bullet items is something that the Blue Curb Ad Hoc Committee recommended, and I'm glad to see that there's finally some attention to these items. Thank you.
So I think we want to do public comment on this item, and then it sounds like what committee member Coates talked about may turn into an action item or a motion from the committee, but this will go to public comment.
See that Mr. Reeling would like to speak. Give me 1 second, Mr. Reeling. Accessible Santa Barbara, would you?
Hello.
Hello. I'm gonna
Okay,
start
great.
time.
Hi, this is Will again, everybody. And I do agree, this is great forward progress, and that board member Kuntz has been working on this issue for many years, and it does seem like there is perhaps a light at the end of the tunnel.
Blue light.
Okay. You know, my perspective is just slightly different on one small part of this, and that is you know, what the subcommittee has been working on for years is a holistic improvement in the availability of blue curbs in the downtown core, as well as the residential areas, and that's great. But it's you know, there is something that changed, okay, while this proposal has been pending, and that is that the city decided to go ahead with a new program of repurposing a great deal of the parking spaces on the 000 blocks in the downtown core for commercial loading and 3-minute, I think 3-minute passenger loading. And that program has rolled ahead, and I think it's important to realize, you know, that there are Title II potential implications for the city repurposing all this parking for that use and not making any of those spaces blue curb. Some of them were red curbs, some of them were yellow curbs. The signage was changed, the curb was painted. Essentially, it's a change of use. It's no longer a parking space for anyone. It's a parking space for this particular use. And that was the priority. That was, you know, providing more accessible parking was not something that they voluntarily chose to do as part of this new program. Okay, so I wrote to Brian on February 25th. I haven't gotten a response, and that's okay. I'll follow up, and I'll follow up with the subcommittee. But I took a walk up and down the state streets, and you know, many of these new commercial loading spaces that have already been created are in a, you know, perfect spot to have a blue curb. And I just think beyond the existing demand for the overall blue curb program, okay, that these alterations that the city has made in these particular spaces that are very close to State Street. So this is also something that could be a very effective part of the planning for the future of State Street, which could be done now. You're providing the some accessible blue curb parking convenient to the State Street promenade now, not part of the 5-year planning process. So so I've got some photos. I will send them, circulate them, and you know, so just kind of as a potential layer or shorter term goal, and within the overall blue curb effort is, can some of these newly created commercial loading zones, kind of few of them, perhaps one on each block, be actually converted, made a blue curb instead? And actually, should legally the city have made a few of these blue curbs instead? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rilling. And, I'm struck by the fact that, Rob Dayton saw the need for the commercial loading zone and jumped on it and got it done quickly. But, here we've been talking about the need of and the rights of the disabled. The commercial businesses don't really have a legal right to have commercial loading zones near their property. But the disabled members of this community do have a legal right to it. And nobody's jumping on that with the same enthusiasm or concern. And so while I appreciate that we may be getting some blue curbs out of this effort, I can't help but feel like a second-class citizen.
Are there any other comments? And thank you, Nick, for that. You're not shocked, of course. If there's no other questions, I'm going to call an adjournment. I think it's been a really good meeting. I want to thank Sarita for her time, and especially Brian for all the stuff that he's done here. I think we're really moving ahead. I think this going over time is another reason why we should have some extra meetings, at least until we get things more straightened out. But anyway, thank you all for everybody, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Jim.
I will call the meeting to an end.
Our next
Thank you.
meeting is August 13th, I believe.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
Right,
Thanks,
Ryan,
Jim.
I have a question. Do you know if there have been applicants for our committee?
I don't know. Haven't checked.
Okay, thank you.
All right, goodbye, all.
All right.
I had a question for Sarita, if you're still there.
Sure.
Yes. Yes.
Is Rochelle still with us?